Wakiwak. Before we adopt the agenda, I'll just like to let council know that I have to catch a ferry, so I'll be leaving here at 11, and the deputy will take over the meeting at that time if we are still in our meeting. I'd like to make a recommendation that we remove 4E because we cannot make adoptions in the committee of the whole. And so I'd like to ask then if we can adopt the agenda with that amendment. 4A, you mean? Removing 4A. Sure. Okay, seconder for that motion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, we'll move over to the meat of this meeting. We'll start with 7A, and I will turn that over to our CFO to talk about the council remuneration report. Go ahead, Harinder. CFO, sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. One of the few tasks that I was asked to work was to see how we stand in terms of the remuneration of the mayor and council. A, how do we stand province-wise? B, how do we stand in comparison to similar municipalities with similar budget and also with similar size population? To arrive at, and one of the other tasks was, you know what, let's determine, we all recognize that this is not a monetary position, this is not for profit, this is a voluntary position. The mayor and council are custodians, are trustees, etc. But we also need to recognize the fact that in today's world, the responsibilities have changed, they have evolved. COVID has presented us with a situation that is unprecedented, there is no legacy. So, and also, as we move forward, how do we encourage a wider dimension of our population to, you know what, to be motivated to come in and serve the community, serve the town, to this council and to occupying the position of the mayor. With that thought, I did some research. I looked at what are we paying today. I looked at what has changed since the mayor and council remuneration became taxable versus non-taxable, what other communities are doing, and based on that, and also looked at what was the remuneration that was originally decided when the bylaw was first passed or when the remuneration was first decided. Based on that, I did some research, and my research is presented in the report that you guys have in front of you. What my recommendation was that finally, after I finish up, but basically what I'm meaning to is that with the council's approval, with the mayor's approval, we basically form a committee or a group that is comprised of a businessman in town or a businesswoman, citizen, and a former councillor, and let them come up with a recommendation to see what the new mayor and council's remuneration would be when the new council takes in effect, I believe October or November of the following year. So hence that is in front of you. It is also important because for us to get this question from you because the operating budget that I'm going to present to you needs to have a component of has a component of salaries or tax outflow, and this is also one of them. This also impacts my capital budget because the surpluses that are left have an impact on what we put in reserve fund and also what goes towards capital. Hence my request to the mayor and council to kindly consider and give us some direction. So hopefully we can have something before end of January or February in terms of how it impacts the operating cost or the operating budget.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, I think the last time that we looked at this, I know the last time we looked at this was in 2013 and it was put in effect for 2014. Comments, council?
In our turn, this crossed our desk, we almost voted for a raise. Wow. Councilor County making the motion. And I think we deferred it back to our original bylaw. And we did get a raise. It's just in fact, right? It's bylaw, we got a little bump up.
Yeah, I think they looked at because the year before, everyone's, that did an increase based on the tax adjustment, didn't come into effect till the following year.
So I think we were hoping that tax, all the other communities would make the tax adjustment and naturally we would get the tax adjustment, but it doesn't seem to work that way. Because it's a pretty small increase, not up for the tax. My question for our CFO, if you can hear me, your report makes no mention of health benefits. That's something I'm interested in for future councils. Is there a number associated with how much health benefits would be for a council member?
Absolutely. I did some research on that, and one of the first things that I asked them was, if, by the way, before I answer that, we did a review of our health benefits for the staff that was not revised for the last, God knows, 7, 8, 9 years. And as I was performing that review, one of my asks was, can I add the members of the council to this health benefit package? And the response that I got was, the only window to add the council members is when the elections will take place and the new council will come into effect. In terms of what the cost etc. would be, Councillor Cole, if that is your question, what I can do is, I can come back to you all by means of email, that I would say if it is a family of 4, and if all 4 opt to take the benefits that anybody like in staff would have, what the cost is for that family. Now, all of you may not have the same family size, so I can come up with a few numbers. Maybe I can speak to each of you to see what your situation is, and without taking names, I can come up with if the composition of the council in terms of their healthcare needs remains the same, what would be the incremental cost going forward?
Just have a question on that. At the beginning of our term, there is an option, and I believe it needs 3 or more councillors to sign in. Is that offered then through the town, or is that offered through UBCM? My understanding was it was offered through UBCM. Do you know?
I apologize, I'm not
Oh,
familiar.
okay, all right. So just to make you aware of that, Harinder, it may go through UBCM. And if that's the case, then I think that if we adopt the philosophy of a rising tide floats all boats and we just sign on, then anyone who needs it is able, or enough of us sign on so that, there's fairness and equity. Did you have a follow-up question? Councillor Cole?
Thank you, Mayor Wixom. It was along those lines. Because I looked into this at the start, thinking I could just buy into it, and you're right, the time period had passed after the election. I wasn't notified by that was an option. So none of us did. My thoughts are, I guess a question for you, Harinder. Benefits played to a public works person, they vary if the person has a family or not, like if there's more charges if they have more dependents, is that correct?
That is correct,
If I may clarify, it's your single, couple, or family. Those are the 3 classifications. It's not, you could have a family of 10 or a family of 3, and you would still be a family. So usually it's single, couple, family are the classifications, and the rates and the premiums are attached to those.
So what might be fair is if we just offer benefits to a single council person, but they have the option to buy in for their spouse or their family. That's an option.
Pay the premium themselves.
Yeah.
The town would only pay the premium for the person, and then if they, that's something that could be.
Harinder, you were going to say something?
Yes, pardon me if I speak out of my turn. It's just that it's a bad day. I wasn't prepared for video. Going forward, this interruption will not happen. But if you guys can allow me about maybe 3-4 days or a week's time, I will exactly narrow it down. Exactly what you were saying: single, couple, family. What the classification would be, and I'll also break it down. For example, I currently, or for example, whatever is our salary times 2 or times 1.5, we get life insurance coverage. So what I will do is I will list it down under criteria, life insurance, health, extended health, single, couple, family, and it will be in a very user-friendly format. I just asked for about a week's time. I'll probably present it sooner, but because this is, I'm dependent on somebody else, I think a week will be more than enough.
Thank you. Other question?
I guess my concern, Harinder, is with the rule, if there is such a rule, that 3 out of 5 of us have to sign on. So yeah, that's what I'm thinking, is just make it mandatory for the single person, and then.
That's right.
Our CAO?
Thank you, Mayor Wickstrom. I've just pulled up the UBCM site and eligibility and enrollment. Following local government elections, elected officials have 4 months to enroll. There must be a minimum of 3 elected official applicants in your local government to enroll. Enrollment must be for the full term of office. So just for some clarity on what UBCM says.
Okay. And then that program then is through UBCM, not through us. Yeah.
That's right.
All right. So a bit of direction for you then, Harinder, when you get back to check with UBCM. Councillor Downey?
I'm just reading through the report here, and one of the rationales for the first, let me state that yes, the compensation does need a review and it does need an adjustment. So I'm in agreement on that. However, to use the argument that prevents people from coming in, I would argue that stating that a mayor's duties are 40 hours a week and a councillor's duties are 20 hours a week is a barrier if that's an expectation that is put on people. Because the reality is it does depend on what portfolios you have and what you choose to take on outside of sitting around this table and the assigned committees that we have. So I think that we need to be careful about what we're putting here in these documents, because we do want people to join in, but some may not have 40 hours a week or 20 hours a week, and there is room for flexibility. I did some homework. Provincial average, a mayor is at 40,000 and the councillors are at 20. Local Port Hardy, our mayor there is at 28. So, we coming back to the fact that yes, we do need an adjustment. So.
And I know that when that first study was done, it was an independent group that did it, and they had 3 ranges, so high, medium, and low. And at that time, I believe the council decided to stay in the medium range.
Yeah, just like a comment on your comment, Councilor Downey, yeah, I don't really like this being tied to like the hourly thing, because to me, like we're on all the time, like whether we're at a meeting or not, it's this job follows you around, so. And to your point, 40 hours of respect to Mayor Wickstrom, maybe that includes the library board role that you took on, EBCM executive, which not necessarily tied to the running of town. So that's just the point that the 40 and the 20 and not, it's a good point to not scare people away.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel guilty all of a sudden if you put the hours in, and I think that it's so, but I think for a comparative purpose, it's valuable to know that different councils are paying different amounts of money, and then taking into consideration that the rate wasn't properly adjusted for the tax loss that we've taken with this council, and that needs to be fixed.
Yeah, and I know around the UBCM table, there's been some conversation as well, and that is that, councils do, and hopefully UBCM will do a study down the road, but, do we look at the average and take the average of the province when it's the average of not so great? When you think about, so a lot of municipalities have a much larger scope than they ever had before. They're looking at housing, at economic development, at some opioid homelessness. And so the questions around the table really are, is the remuneration reflective of the scope of the work that councils find themselves in?
I would just add to that, I believe it needs to be reflective of each council, because you're absolutely correct. Each council will have different areas of that are impacting their scope and duties. So, you know, what we contend with here is maybe different from another community, although they may have the exact same population, the same budget. You know, it depends what's going on in your borders.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Whitstrom. Just for contrast from my experience, and to punctuate what Councillor Downey was saying, I have worked with the mayors and councillors who chose to simply show up for meetings. So, you know, they worked essentially maybe 4 hours every 2 weeks, which is well within their purview. So for the extreme contrast of what our current mayor and council is doing, I have worked in recent years with other mayor and councils where they do the bare legislative requirements. Something else to keep in mind.
Yeah. Though I feel we shouldn't have to reach for the lowest common denominator, right? Go ahead,
I was
Councillor.
gonna say, that's where the hours kind of concerned me, because you don't want to have somebody from an administrative seat suddenly turn around and start asking for time cards and validations. And I looked at Brad last night and I said, there's no way I do that. He looked at me and he said, are you nuts?
Mhm.
Like, are you nuts? He's like, let's just add up what you've done in the last week. And for me, I didn't even comprehend that, because like Derek said, you're always on. And so I understand from a comparative point of view, and I totally agree, it needs to be done. I'm very lucky I've got the 2 bosses I've got, but if I worked at IGA, I would have to be taking time off without leave. And you know, you guys are all in a spot where you've been able to make those rearrangements, but because of the businesses that you're in. But if you're somebody who's actually working, there needs to be a way to balance that a little bit. So that's
Yeah, and
kind of
I've
my 2
spoken to
bits.
other mayors in other municipalities, like for example, Fernie had that kind of dynamic. And so when you talk about, in the report, it talks about having a diversity on council for those who wouldn't have the option. Like in Fernie, there was one example where a councillor was going to lose their benefits because they had to take time off work. So the compensation or the remuneration compensated their lost wages at work, and then the benefits helped them be able, as a younger person with a family, remain on council and be able to do some of those duties. Yeah, and I mean, what I hear around the table is that we're for looking at it. So the recommendation would there be a motion to make a recommendation to set up a committee and have them investigate and report back to us?
Question.
Yeah, my preference would be just hash it out and make the call. But just to go back again, more time. It could be simple as adding the benefits, putting back the tax benefit we lost, making it follow COLA after that, or by law. Add $50 a month for a cell phone, maybe, and bounce around a little bit, but I am a little concerned about us having all these morning meetings lately. That's not necessarily going to work for everybody, so maybe childcare or something.
Well, yeah, that, or I think the other thing is we get together as a council when there's a new council and come in and we find out what everybody's schedule is like and what works well for them. I think that would be appropriate. Councillor Downey and then Councillor Barron.
I agree with Councillor Cole's sentiments. I'm another committee is really what we need. We can all do a Google search. There's documents and reports. We have contacts in other communities. I think that we can come up with what would be reasonable and appropriate numbers for this council. And brass tacks would be just the simple adjustment for the loss of the tax benefit, which was defeated last time.
That'd be a good starting point, I think. And I think that Harinder has helped us by opening up this conversation and getting getting it moving, and maybe we could take it without having another committee who's probably gonna come back to us with 1,000 questions before we get started.
Well, the idea is that, oh, sorry.
I was gonna say, what Derek's kind of proposing in a way, to me, would almost be like your base, and then maybe there is a way that at the beginning of the next council, you've got your base, and then maybe there is okay, if you take on this portfolio, there's kind of this expectation, and it gets adjusted a little bit based on each council, but you've got your base, which is the caught up and keeps us normal, and within that, you're expected to do 2 meetings a month and 6 cows or whatever, right? You just kind of come up with this is your, and then for somebody who can spend more time and almost make it a bit of a time card system where they're maybe putting in once a month, because, if my bosses are paying me to do this, then maybe I wouldn't reclaim it. And then that still kind of keeps a bit of that small town. I mean, that's part of the reason we're in the position we're in, is because we had people that were running it who didn't want to take money. But the reality of it is the responsibilities have shifted a lot, but you also don't want to be, you remember you're paying this out of your taxes. And when the government's the largest employer in BC and the highest paying employer in BC, we got a problem.
I think there is a merit in that, because there are some cities where you do earn a salary or a wage, and then others you don't. Health network, there's nothing. Regional district, you're compensated for your time. So we already have some inequities in our system, and that's probably worth looking at, because I can tell you, and there's different committees that we each serve on that will pull a significant amount of time, and so how do we?
Well, and it still leaves the option for that person as well. Like if I do harbor committee and I don't want to bill for that, say 3 hours a month or 4 hours a month, then that's left to me. But if you were a person who you actually, like maybe for childcare reasons or whatever, you needed to be able to do that, then there's no guilt, there's no eyeballs raising.
Yeah, I would disagree, and not from necessarily us around the council table, but eyebrows would be raised when it comes time to report, and all of a sudden you've got one councillor who has thousands of dollars of expenses and one that doesn't. And I think that either everyone claims the mileage and the meetings, or nobody does, because an outside person who doesn't understand the dynamics will look at that and go, oh, why does Councillor Barron have twice the amount of a mayor and they're only a councillor? There's that. And then the other thing is, I hear what you're saying about committees, but I'll give you the example of 2013. Mayor Fernie actually had a task, get a committee together, and you go ahead and, my dear, if you think we should look at that. If you recall, it was 40. But our remuneration was 4,800 or 60 some. It was really, really low, really low.
Minuscule. It didn't pay my daycare.
Yeah, and so I say that because when the increase came, it can be reported as a 100 or 200% increase. Like that's how they're going to report it. So what the committee did at that time, and I believe a committee would do now, is it takes that off of us. Because an independent committee outside of council has said, you know what, we've talked to council, we've looked at all the things, we've looked at the average, we understand life post-COVID and 21st century. This is what we think. And this is what we recommend. And it really does take it off of us to be able to then say, okay, let's look at the recommendations, make some adjustments if you want, but then nobody's coming back if it is a 50% increase or whatever. I'm just throwing that out there because it was very, very easy, and there was very little flack that came after that. And it was quite a substantial increase to catch up, really. So just something to consider.
Yeah, at the end of the day, we have to vote on.
Yeah.
Vote, so we're gonna wear it, and it's for the next council side.
And I'm not the least bit concerned about the optics of remuneration when we've got other issues that cost the town way more than the council remuneration is costing.
100%.
Have been neglected in the past that somehow never seems to see the light of day. Us wearing it. And I'm not gonna go through the list, but it's big. And I think if we manage the town properly as a council, whatever we choose to pay ourselves for it will be reflected in the savings, in a better use of the public's money that they're gonna get if the councilors are looked after. And I think that childcare opportunity means a young person can get on council. And I think a young family that maybe they have a job where they're getting benefits or they're not getting benefits, either way, I guess that's an attractant for them to come on council. Those are low cost items that would really strengthen the depth of council. I think we can add those without, and if people want to complain about it, if they, if the population doesn't like that idea, well, there's a ballot box and they can let us know they didn't like what we did and don't have to elect us. Like that's an option, especially if we set something up at the next council. So it's not like it's directly benefit us tomorrow if we do this. I think we should be willing to make this decision and hash it out and come up with something sound.
So how do we do that then? Is like, do we all just kind of send our little notes from what we've said today to Harinder, let Harinder put it together into a package and then it just comes onto a regular agenda? Is that a feasible?
My preference is Brainerd does a report based on adding benefits, making up the tax loss, the childcare component, and the cell phone. Don't see what those numbers look like.
So we're looking at just, we're just looking at the tax loss, that's it?
We'll see what that looks like first.
And you said
All right.
COLA too.
Sorry, Harinder, go ahead.
Madam Mayor, with due respect to all of us, as Councillor Mitchell was saying, the council is busy and our council is also focusing on many other things which have a much higher dollar value impact, not only today, also for the future of the town. In my opinion, and please pardon me if I don't know the protocol, but in my opinion, wouldn't the council's time be better spent on focusing on those decisions, those issues that Councillor Mitchell is talking of, number one. Number two, with due respect, and I'm going to be very upfront, it's important to take the bias away from the existing council and let the town manage it. Let a volunteer resident, let an existing businessman, let an ex-councillor come in and let's see what fresh perspective they have to say. Whatever is their recommendation, it's only a recommendation. Council at that time could decline it. But would it help to take some of the time on other things that Councillor Mitchell was suggesting, and let's bring a fresh perspective without any bias into it. But, and again, I seek forgiveness if I've spoken out of my position or if I shouldn't have made this comment.
If we were to do the committee, Harinder, when do you see that actually happening and fitting into your timelines? Because to get this done before the end of this year is not feasible at all. So what are you thinking, putting a committee together in January and by the end of February, they would have a recommendation and then that still leaves us enough time to get everything done for budget, or what are you thinking?
Is it Councillor Barron or Councillor Downing?
Sorry, that's Councillor Barron.
Hi, good morning, Councillor Barron. My thought was that, and I will seek Pete's help for that, but my thought was if the council approves what I just said, then I would go to Pete and ask, where do we go about this? Do we advertise on our website and give let's say by December 15th for them to come in, give them a month to interview the existing councillors, and their reports to be presented no later than January 31st, 2022. And after that, on the next council meeting, we present that.
Is the intention for this to be on the 22 budget or the 23 budget?
Councillor, sorry, who's this?
This is Councillor Downey.
Councillor Downey, is the intention for this to be reflected on the 22 budget or the 23 budget?
Councillor Downey, there is no way, actually I'm going to repeat myself. The intent of this is to make this change effective for the new council, which partially would impact, I believe the new council the elections happen in October or November. So the intent is that for the 2 months in 2022, the new compensation will get reflected, but it will set the ground for full year compensation starting from January 1st, 2020. So from my perspective, from budget perspective, Councillor Downey, even if I'm off, let's say the new committee says, okay, well, we need to increase the compensation by 200%. It is not going to throw my budget off because it is only going to impact just a little bit of few months, and we can always adjust it over the future years. So to give you a short and sweet answer, this will not take into effect before November 1st, 2022 for the sake of it.
Thank you. So then really there is no urgency to have a report back by January 31st. We're going into Christmas. So
long as it's in time, and I think Harinder, it's to be captured in the 5 years. So moving forward in those numbers, that the lines that we currently don't have filled up will be, I think that's what he means. It doesn't have, you're correct. It doesn't have to be the 31st, but so it's done in time for when the budget is out.
So the question becomes what's material, and I can't imagine that this would be a material number that the auditors would even flag. So,
Councillor Cole?
Mayor Whitson, I don't really see the advisory group saving us any time. Like, who's going to pick the group? We all apply. We've got to hash it out over council. So I see that sort of being fraught. I think time is of the essence here. The election is coming, so the longer we wait, the sooner we have a nice package that people will consider that. Right now, if they're looking at it, this might be a non-starter. If we have this all together 2 months before the election, it's a little late for someone to consider it. So I think, like I said, we just get a clear report on what simple benefits, simple upgrades I talked about would look like. Take it from there.
So again, that goes back to what I was saying. If we all leave this meeting and everybody sends Harinder an email with what all our points are, then he can compile it together and go, okay, all 5 of them said that compensate for the tax thing. And then what he brings back to us should encompass everything that everybody said, and then we can pull apart from there. And he's on the road, so I'm just thinking from a being fulsome point of view. He's on the road. We all send our email in, then he can put the report together, come back with the numbers like you said, and then we can go from there.
So somebody make a recommendation?
Well, I feel we've actually come to a consensus already, so I think we could go with that consensus. What I've heard so far is option for benefits, childcare option, cell phone costs, the tax loss that the council suffered because the federal government's change, and the cost of living increase. I don't see a lot of support for tracking time, which is complicated as hell if we start doing that. So those 5 items, is there anything else that I missed that there was sort of substantial in? We had those 5 items, okay, put it back together with those considerations. Is there any more that we really want to throw in there? Probably not. We just want to make it fair, that's all. We don't want to get too complicated. Then we're already past that stage of sending a bunch of stuff out. We got it. We already agreed on, I think, more or less on those items. So I want to make a motion that we ask Werner to take those 5 items and build a proposal using those as the core. And we'll go from there.
Recommendation. We can't make one. Yeah, recommendation.
Did you get those 5 items okay, Lauren?
Yeah, cell phone, childcare, healthcare benefits, cost of living increase, and the loss on the tax.
Tax credit that we used to get.
Sorry, could you Sorry, I missed the last point after cost of living. My apologies.
Tax credit that we lost a couple years ago.
And that,
Thank you so much.
and council will, if there's, anything else, we'll email you in the next. If there was anything else to contribute, we would email her and her.
No, thank you so much. I'm writing notes, but this is helpful. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thank you, Harinder.
yeah, the only other thing is if some of us feel there should be another $5,000 on top of that or something, they just that or speak out, I guess.
Well, once we get the report back too,
Well,
then you'll know what the numbers are and,
We can speak at
we
that
can
time.
speak at that time. Because, I mean, what do you put down for a childcare credit? Right, and that's where my thought of, when you get a new council and you say, okay, like none of us have children, so do we need to have that childcare credit built in? I don't know. I want to see what the dollar value is worth, because as a taxpayer, I don't want to be paying more tax so that I cannot, do you know what I mean? If the intent is for childcare, then maybe we have a fund that's the childcare fund, and if you need to use it, then it comes out as an expense thing.
To be clear, I believe that is an expense in previous council. If you had those expenses, you just submitted for them.
Then
It
that-
wasn't documented, but it was an understanding.
But then that needs to come out at orientation a little bit clearer, because.
Or a policy, a
or
clearer
policy,
policy
clearer
set.
policy.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's maybe what I'm getting more to.
Sure, we can find tune that, yeah.
Question, call the
Go ahead.
question.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, next we have item 7B, which is the utilities fees for 2022.
Wonderful. Okay. Are you asking me to get this done, or?
Sure, if you would like, go ahead. It's your report.
Thank you so much. So, we currently have a bylaw that gives the direction as to how much the increase should be in the three categories: water, storm water, and sewer system. And it is linked to a CPI increase that happened over the past 2 years. Last budget meeting we had, we talked about a need to replace our infrastructure, and for us to start planning about it today, do something about it. We also talked about the fact that, we have some reserve funds, but are we contributing enough? When this discussion was taking place, Councillor Mitchell time and again said one thing. He said, I want to see efficiencies in our system. I am not in favor of raising taxes to build surpluses. And very well said, and totally, I thought it makes perfect sense. Now, the question that I have is, how do I build reserve funds? We already have 3 or 4 statutory reserve funds. If the council approves setting up a new statutory reserve fund without raising taxes, what it means is the money that you're contributing to the fifth reserve fund is now being taken away from the existing 4 reserve funds. So whatever you were contributing before to 4, we are now splitting amongst 5. So is it a real surplus add-on? I don't think so. Then I said, well, okay, if the council, how do we contribute to surpluses, to reserve funds? The contribution to reserve funds come in from the annual surpluses. If Councillor Mitchell has his way, he doesn't want the taxes to go up, so the revenue is not going to go up. Then he's telling us, Councillor Mitchell talks about efficiency. So one efficiency that I found is that, look, we are giving people, the taxpayers, an opportunity to pay by credit card. This is costing the town about $41,000 to $45,000 a year. We can do one thing. We can say, okay, either we stop taking tax payments by credit card, or if somebody wants to still pay their taxes by credit card, we agree to add a surcharge to such payments, and that surcharge to be equal to what our actual cost is, so that we are revenue neutral. to existing reserve funds or a new reserve fund that we would have for any other thing. I also, Council Cole, in one of his meetings, I believe the same meeting, Council Cole, correct me if I'm wrong, also suggested that we think about adding a levy or a surcharge. The choice of word may not be right, but conceptually that's what we found. For example, that's what I understood. For example, we have 865 taxable accounts. Can we afford to charge a $50 add-on or a surcharge or a bump? That would 865 or let's say 900 times 50 will give us an additional $45,000 that we can allocate to a reserve fund. So that $50 does not taking credit card by itself averages out to approximately $95,000 to $100,000. Hence, an example of what Councillor Mitchell said, mind efficiency. So my bottom line is, as of today, I have an existing bylaw that I can rely upon, and we can do the utility billing next month. However, we need to be strategically thinking. We need to be thinking long term. We know what the reality is, and we also know that almost $9-10 million that is forecasted to happen, those were 2018 and 2019 numbers. There is going to be a cost building up, and who knows, the cost could be 40-50% higher. Hence, my memorandum to each to be presented to the council with some direction.
Harinder, I have a question for you. We have heard in the past, and perhaps you don't know this answer right now, that our current utilities fees are not self-funding. We had in the past put our put some gas tax money in to top up to make sure that it was covered. Is this the case? Mayor, yeah, it is. Mayor Wickstrom, sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. Mr. Wickstrom, you are absolutely right. One of the analysis I was doing, maybe I will do it for our next presentation if council asks me. One of the things I was planning to do was, for the three categories that we built, what is our annual revenue? And what is our expense for each of the three categories? To show you, to present the numbers to you, to show you that it is true, that it is not self-funding. Now, one other thing is, self-funding, Mayor Wickstrom, in my eyes, is one way to look at it. Self-funding, what is the definition of self-funding? Do you consider self-funding for that one operating year? Or do you also consider self-funding for any replacements that are coming in over a period of time? So, in my opinion, self-funding is not only today, but also what's coming ahead of us. And we need to look at both of them. But if the council wants, I'll be happy to how they are self-funding or what has been surpluses or deficits in the past, let's say, 3 years.
Thank you. Any other questions for Harinder?
I have a question, staff. We've heard their discussion about credit cards and debit card usage. The one ask there was an assessment done because there's a number of suppliers, Global Payments, there's different Chase, there's different providers for that service. Have we looked at merchant card services to determine whether there's a cheaper opportunity? Cheaper fees?
Didn't Claudia do a big review? Yeah.
I think so, yes. Yeah, I don't know for sure.
Harinder has an answer. Yeah, go ahead.
Councillor Downing, was it Councillor Downing asking?
Yes, it was.
Okay. Hi, Councillor Downing, I asked this question too when I prepared this report, and I was told that last year or maybe prior to that, Claudia Frost had done that research, and she had successfully negotiated a lower cost with our current provider. The answer to that is, the long-term answer to that is, you can change the provider. We can reduce our cost by half, just for the sake of argument. This is all we do succeed. But that doesn't take away the fact that we are still being hit by a cost. And my request is that those taxpayers who do not pay by credit card should not be penalized to pay the cost of those taxpayers who choose to do that. So yes, changing the service provider or investigating more leads to what Councillor Mitchell was saying, find efficiency. And we will be happy to, I will personally ensure that I'm going to go back and research more also. But again, it doesn't take away the fundamental questions of why should taxpayers pick up the saddle?
So my position is making it simple for the taxpayers and making it simple on the administration time as well. Having surcharges, fees, becomes another form of reconciliation, a record keeping that's got to be tracked. It was a bill, where do we record it? Where do we place it? We're not trying to add to workload. We're trying to keep things simple and allow people to get their taxes paid, allow staff to get their job done. That's all.
Councillor Cole?
Thank you.
Question for staff, not sure which staff, but if we were to make this change to get rid of the credit cards, is that a bylaw change or a policy change or what? What is on record now saying that we can accept the credit cards? How will we change this? How do we change it?
Thank you, Councillor Cole. Nothing on record right now. My recommendation when Harinder and I were speaking about this would be either a policy or we could, it would be a little more onerous to put it in all of the bylaws. So we could do a policy reflecting that, but at least something done publicly so the public is aware and not blindsided.
Make a motion.
One of the recommendations being not doing it for the 2022 tax season, but for 2023 to give people a year's worth of time to make adjustments to either their banking or the way that they save.
My thought is the utilities isn't a large bill, but our property taxes are. And, you know, if we continue to take them for utilities, but when the utilities go out, give people the 6 months notice that their credit card won't be accepted for property taxes, gives them enough time. And the other thing is too, if we find, like if staff tells us, you know, like we're way more behind on the taxes than we ever were before, and we realize that taking credit cards was actually helping us collect the taxes sooner. There's two things, my two thoughts on that. One, they're paying a credit card company for interest, if that's the thing. And if we charge interest, we actually would save the taxpayer money. And two, there's nothing for us changing the policy for the following year going, you know what, we tried it. We realized that it did create hardship for our residents and we'll just change it back again. But 6 months is a lot of notice to give somebody for their income tax. Property tax, thank you, sorry.
So, Mayor, which were you suggesting that we just do for property tax, not utilities, or again, utilities is coming up soon?
Sooner, yeah.
But long term, it should be both. I mean,
Well, that's up to council. I was just suggesting one over the other because I felt that's probably the biggest bill. Staff said that the $40,000 was taken at the time when property tax comes. I'm actually having a gallbladder attack, so I'm a little sketchy with my talking right now. But it's during the property tax time that 40,000 number was isolated. So it wasn't actually, it's probably more than that when you add utilities, the utility time.
Yeah, I just want to say certain, you know, I would say I'm a commercial building, my utility bill is quite high, so.
I think
Probably
that we can, yeah, I don't think we should lose sight of the fact that we have a finite pool of wage earners to contribute to our costs. And ultimately, if we don't get a whole bunch of government grants, that's who has to pick up the cost for operating the village we live in. And so, you know, maybe what we have to do is promote or sponsor financial management seminars for people who need to use their credit card to finance their property tax. Because there's got to be a way around that. You can't, that's not a sustainable model for them, for taxpayers, and it's not a sustainable model for us. Our costs go up artificially and we feed the banks money. That doesn't make sense. We need to put our town resources into things that we can actually benefit from. We're not benefiting and our citizens aren't benefiting from paying interest and fees to the banks. And by taking credit cards, we're encouraging that. So if there's a problem in the community that needs to be dealt with, that we've got a whole bunch of people that are having financial difficulties and they can't pay their tax and they're financing it at 20%, we're not helping them by allowing them to do that. We need to be more responsible. That's my.
Councillor Downing?
Just a comment, we're living in a day where a lot of people don't have checks anymore. And so if this goes, if we take this away, we will need very clear and concise as to how these things will be paid, if they're online or however, that needs to be spelled out right now. And I just say this from experience, it's easy if people are busy with life, you pick up the phone, you call the town office, and you pay your bill, it's done. Finding a computer, what happens to people who aren't paying their bills online using web-based stuff? What happens there? So things aren't always just black and white in the day.
Then we just go with surcharge, they cover the 1.65 or whatever, and staff, I'm sure, has got the skills to work that out, and it gives them that option.
My mom is one of those people who does do online banking and she has checks.
Yeah.
I just want to motion or recommend that we accept credit cards for the utility season 2022 with a note, if we're going to follow the direction of staff, that property taxes in 2022 we will no longer receive credit cards. Here's a question, are you going to accept debit payments? We haven't talked about that. Well, there's a cost to that as well. That's why I'm asking the question.
Hold on a second, Harinder, Pete, and then Harinder.
Thank you, Mayor Wickstrom. I'm trying to pull back my memory from, so Claudia Frost did do a full report on all of this spending last year, and I'm trying to pull from my memory from that. There was no cost to debits or interact to the town, nor through check, cash, online banking. Where and my discussions with one of our bank representatives is the costs to the community or to even retailers comes through the different levels of credit cards that different people have. So what sort of their kickback on that credit card is. So, you know, a CIBC Classic has a very low impact to the
Merchant fees.
Merchant fees, thank you. That's the words I'm looking for. But somebody that's got a black card gets 2.9% rebate. That's a huge effect on us. So that's where this $40,000 cost comes from. Is the so there? I think what our CFO was trying to bring forward is that inequity between somebody that pays by check or pays by debit is covering the $40,000 cost of the person that's still getting using that the more robust credit card.
Harinder?
Mayor Wickstrom, I also want to tell you that it's just not that I have written that paper and presented to you. There is something else that has happened behind the background, and that is we met with CIBC, and my understanding is that as of today, the option to pay online is not available to every financial institution. For example, if I'm banking with, I'm just making it up, if I'm banking with Bank of Montreal, and if I want to pay my taxes or my utility bills to Town of Fort McNeil, Town is not even listed as a recipient. It is only listed as a recipient, I believe, with the credit union that is in town. So one of the things that we are working on to implement is, as we get ready to implement this, if approved by the council, is we will be registered with almost every major credit union and financial institution. Town of Fort McNeil would be. So no matter who you bank with, you'll be able to pick us up as a vendor and make your payment sitting at your home. Currently, that privilege, as I understand, is only available if you're banking with the the credit union in front of CIBC. So my point was, we are taking we have taken other administrative steps in the background to prepare for this rollout. If it happens.
Thank you. We have a half motion on the table.
We have a half motion on the table.
Is anybody supporting?
Yeah,
Seconding the motion?
That was just for,
the motion is, so I'm gonna go back again, that credit cards continue to be received for utility payments. Within the notice would be notice to residents, to taxpayers, notice to taxpayers that credit cards will no longer be accepted for property taxes effective this tax season. And we'll find out what this looks like.
Seconder for that motion before we discuss? Okay, go ahead.
I am concerned, though, to find out that, you know, this discussion of other methods of paying isn't set up already ahead of making a request such as this.
Go ahead, Derek.
I do generally support that, also down in, but I think it's 22, 23, the utilities got to be moved in there too. Not just. So no utilities this year, after that, all taxes and utilities.
But wouldn't it make more sense just to go with that motion with the idea that there would be a review at the end of the tax season so that that decision could be made and put in place? Because if you make the decision now and then you find out that you didn't claim all your monies in and it was a problem or a hardship, and you want to go to a service fee, you're kind of almost putting a cart before a horse.
Sorry, I'm going to let Councillor Downey, Councillor Bear take the meeting for me, please. Thanks. Councillor Cool.
Mitchell?
Thank you.
I support the concept of reducing the amount that we pay fees on for the payments we receive. I would like to see that 2022 be the last year that we take credit cards for utilities and
Property tax.
property tax. But so we could eliminate the property tax thing, as you said, but it will also be the last year that we take credit cards for utilities. So that's kind of the warning would be, this is it. From here on forward, property taxes and utilities will be paid other than with a credit card. And it's only the responsible thing to do. Try paying your hydro bill with a credit card. You can't.
Yeah.
If you do, they charge you. And
Mayor Wickstrom?
Yeah, I like the idea of doing it this way for this year, and we can see what the implications are for people paying their property taxes. The next council can adjust the policy. We can ask staff to put that on the agenda for the next council. And then that would give a number of months where the public would then, our residents would be able to know that utilities are also not going to be accepted.
Councillor Downey?
I would say that we could even have a review in September.
Yeah.
The bulk of the taxes are paid by July 1. We'll know the implications. If we review it in September ahead of the property tax sales, you know, we don't necessarily have to leave it for the next council. We can make a decision then if we want to go forward and blanket all the way.
So are you amending your?
No, I'm not, leaving it as it is.
you know, I'm going to support that just because I think it's a step forward and we can make an adjustment, as you pointed out, in September if we want.
Yeah.
So I'm going to support that. Call the
Okay,
question.
so I was just gonna say, I wanted to say it. Call the question. Question, with the gavel. So call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Go ahead, Councillor Cole.
I'm wondering if we can see Claudia's report, probably would have been good to see today ahead of this. Can I make a recommendation to see the report?
Sorry, which report?
I'll second
Claudia's.
that.
Claudia, on the credit
Claudia's.
card fees and whatnot.
We did get it once, didn't we?
No.
I don't know, I'm trying to rack my brain to see if I actually ever saw it.
We asked for that report. She didn't because we made a motion in council to have it done. It was never released to council.
So you second.
Well, that's okay. You'll find it on the agenda. Yeah.
Relevant to this discussion.
Okay, so all those in favor? Opposed, carried. Staff's got that. So then we'll move on to 7C, statutory reserves. Harinder, did you want to start the conversation on this as well?
It goes on from the decision that you just walked me through. And that is, we have, for lack of better word, an infrastructure that is old and that is tired. I was told by Julian that a treatment plant also is going to come up for the replacement over the next few years. He and I had a good discussion yesterday. We reviewed our statutory fund, a report of which was previously presented to the council. And I would like to ask for council's questions on whether they would support and add on like $50 a year or $40 a year, and just to start building up or adding that buffer to this reserve fund that is already in place. I know I may be contradicting myself because Councillor Mitchell was of the opinion no increase, but $4 a month will go a long way for us so that we don't have to rely on borrowed money, so that we are not hit by a massive tax bill 10 years down the line because all of a sudden we have some emergency. I totally get it. We can have access to funds. We can have access to borrowed money. The province comes in and so on. But building, understanding and acknowledging that we have a failing infrastructure that is old and tired, and we need to bump up the money, I think will be strategic long-term planning. And I ask for your support or some directions if we can add maybe a $50, bill in some shape or form through utilities. So we also talk about self-funding concept that Mayor Wickstrom you talked about in the previous conversation.
I wanted to comment first. So sorry, it's Anne Marie, Councillor Barron. The idea of a surcharge going on that is going directly to something that is directly in result of planning, I have no issue. I like that accounting. My issue is when it gets raised and then it seems to just kind of go into general revenues and you don't know exactly where it's going. You and I talked about it in our meeting. The fire department should not be a surprise every year because we should know what's expiring. Public Works, I guess it's asset depreciation. If they need a new truck 3 years from now, we should know that now. So I myself would fully support it. We're saying this is going to be needed because I don't like, I know Ryan, we disagree, but I don't like the idea of getting a major surcharge or a 10 or 20% increase 5 years down the road when we could have been doing a little bit the whole way along.
I'm completely in favor of this, as long as it's accompanied with the same intense scrutiny that we're giving this, right, that we give to our operating budget, which goes up every year with no scrutiny. Because I believe that all the money that we would like to put away here is already there. We don't need to tax more for it. So if we're going to put some scrutiny to our operating budget, last year when I brought up the operating budget, I was told staff wouldn't ask for it if they didn't need it. That simply isn't true. I used to sell stuff to the government all the time. And at the end of the year, I'd get paid for invoices that I wouldn't do deliveries for until the middle of the next year because stuff wasn't available, but they had money in their budget and they had to spend it. I'm not accusing staff of doing that, but you don't have control over every person and the way they think. It's human nature. And our job is to scrutinize our expenses too, not just where can we raise more money because we have these bills coming. We need to start looking at where the money's going. In my business, that's how I stay afloat, by watching what I spend, because you can control your expenses sometimes you don't have much control over your income. So I'll support it. If council keeps in mind that when we come to talking about operating budgets, we gotta also scrutinize that and squeeze it, just like we're squeezing a taxpayer for another $50 here. We're gonna squeeze them for not using their credit card. You know, so we better be willing to squeeze ourselves a little bit.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's, you know, I've thought about it and it's prudent to ask staff to look where we have some savings. I'm also still in favor of a 1 or 2% tax at least, or a tax increase. Because we have millions of dollars of infrastructure. And the way we now have our reserves set up, I believe that the money is going to go into those reserves. They're not going to be lost in a general fund. And I feel that we can confidently stand in front of our residents and say, you know, this is why this was done. This is where we are. This is where we want to be. And these are the reserve funds that are set up. And this is how we're going to get there. So I agree with you on the looking in the operational budget as well, but I still, you know, would like to see us consider. I don't think, Harinder, when you talk about Councillor Mitchell's viewpoint on the zero tax increase isn't necessarily shared by everyone, but I do agree with him on the operational side. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mayor and Councillor.
Councillor Cole?
Harinder, it's Councillor Cole. I have a question for you. You say we have 868 accounts. I assume that means properties. Are those properties with improvements, or does that include vacant properties?
First of all, I would have to get back to you on that. What I did is, I just said, hey, let's find out the full number now. So please allow me to get back to you on that.
Harinder, Laura's kind of got her hand up here. Can I?
We don't have any charges for vacant lots for utilities.
Okay, so
That's your question.
where I'm going with that is, we're gonna call this $50 surcharge. I'd like to propose we put it in our stormwater reserve. We've got, you know, that reports for millions of dollars, and we only have 150,000 in there right now. But I would like to charge that fee to vacant land, which rain falls on, and we have to deal with their stormwater as well. And I think it's really timely with all the floods that we ask our citizens to buck up more in this category. I think they would see value in it. I agree, nobody wants to see 5% increase. It just poof, you know, get absorbed into general revenue. So I'm in favor of a surcharge. I just think it needs to be higher, either A, roping in the vacant properties. How far are we gonna get $43,000 a year when we have a $2 million bill? And, you know, we have this is a health and safety issue with the slide. You know, we need to continue to work on fugitive water, awesome word. So if we've got 1,000 accounts, great, and maybe we're making 50,000, but it's just not enough. And
But it's a start.
it's a start. But I would like to see it be $100.
Councillor Downey?
I personally would defer that discussion until we have the full budget discussion before we assess where surcharges should be added. But I do have a question, and I think this comes back to COVID times where we saw municipalities in the Greater Vancouver area that pleaded boredom that they had no money. And then it was found out they had millions upon millions sitting in reserves, and yet they were pleading poverty that their city was going to shut down. And yet they're sitting on dollars. So we have here non-statutory reserves with balances as of November 14th. So I think I just need some clarity here. We had pool reserves set aside. Is this being used to pay for the upgrades that we did this year? Will we see this go away, or is this being left untouched?
Yes. May I take this, Councillor?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you so much. So my answer may sound a little vague because I don't think I fully followed the question 100%. But here is what generally the concept is. Anything that is sitting in a statutory reserve fund is only meant for that purpose.
So I'm referring to the non-statutory. These are non-statutory.
Sorry, go ahead. Please. Go ahead.
So that's my question is non-statutory. We have $305,000 for road and sidewalk. We put in sidewalks. Did we draw some of it, this reserve down for our sidewalks that we did this year? Same sort of question for the pool and the stormwater. Was we last year, in the last couple of years, set reserves aside for these projects? This year, many of them were tackled. Will we see these numbers adjusted?
Thank you for clarifying this, Councillor Downey. Thank you so much. 100%. So whatever is sitting in these reserve funds now, and the corresponding projects were completed, some of them were funded and some of them had a shortfall. At the end of the year, when you will see the financials being prepared, an accounting adjustment will be made, and these funds balances will not remain what you see.
Thank you. Thank you.
We actually talked about this a few days ago that yes, they won't remain the same. And I'm sorry if I didn't make a note of that. For some reason, I thought I did make a note that these funds will depreciate once the accounting adjustments were made. I'll try to be more careful going forward to write as much as that.
It's all good. Thank you.
Thank you.
So if we go back to Harinder's report there, he's looking for direction. Provide direction to staff if they can implement the utility increases for the billing of 2022 utility charges per existing bylaw. Can I get a recommendation that's what we're looking for, correct?
Thank you, Chair Barron. There's a couple of items we're looking for here. So if council wishes to move forward with just the bylaws that we have in place, that is one of the directions that we're looking for. Or if we are going to put a surcharge, as our CFO has put forward as a recommendation, there will need to be either an amendment to a bylaw or a new bylaw presented for council in order to do that. So that there's some choices there. Either we move forward like we traditionally have, or staff takes direction to go prepare new bylaws.
Mayor Wickstrom?
So we've asked Harinder to give us some feedback on the utilities. And I believe what I heard Councillor Downey saying is that once we get those, then we would still be able to make that decision at a next meeting or the first meeting in January in order to have the bills out in time for the end of because I think that information that we've asked for is important before we make this decision. So, you know, I think we were asking Harinder, is it self-funding? We need to find that out. And what is that increase? And is self-funding meaning also that we're planning for the future and that a portion of those utilities will go out, or are we going to do it as a surcharge? And I think that's important for us to have first before we make this decision.
Councillor Cole?
Yeah, I was just concerned, Councillor Downey, like deferring this to part of the budget process, but this is something we decide for the bills. So is there any appetite, I'm going to ask council to, I'm suggesting this would create a new stormwater category, which would be throwing $50 on the sewer and the water, because Rinder said they are not self-funding, and it's painfully obviously not. To which degree is another story, but we should consider.
Harinder, on the report, can we add for you to let us know like how that might be captured so that we're able to put that? So whether it's in 2 or 3% increase in the utility bills or just a flat out surcharge that goes directly to. Can you include that in your report and what that would net us? Can I make that recommendation then? Move that Harinder includes that in the report on how we can capture funds for the stormwater reserves.
All the reserves.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were talking about, okay.
Well, I'm just, what are we looking at increases for sewer too? Is it just standard 2% a year? I don't know. Or Garbage, is that going up?
So I guess that leads back, then if I back up, I'll remove that off the table, that we really do need to see from Harinder, the report, like are the utility bills capturing everything and is there a deficit? Because I know before we were topping up funds from our gas tax,
That was only for the one, that was for the water lines.
water lines.
Only the water lines. Some of those others are paying their way.
Yeah.
If I'm trying to recall the document that we've been given.
Except what we're told, we need to do sewage treatment plant checks.
We just heard.
Mayor Wickstrom, if I have a minute.
Yeah, Councillor Barron has taken over from.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Hi, good morning. Councillor Barron, just one question, one comment I have. You know, the information that you're seeking is great and I will present it to you. The bottom line is we have been consistent with our revenue and our expense and surplus. So the surplus is what it is. It has remained almost similar in normal years. We will need to find extra money to fund the added cost. I will present the report to you, but I can tell you this, we will need to find that extra $50 or whatever that surcharge is or to fund this. There is no extra money available to fund it. Having said that, I get your direction and I will present a formal report over the next, whenever the assigned date would be, to help you make them more informed looking at the numbers.
Okay, thank you. And sorry, I was stepping in and out. Have we covered the credit card payment? We're all good with that?
Yeah.
That one's good, okay. And so then the number 2, direction requested by staff, that ties into number 1, which ties into this report. Am I correct? So that item is both, okay, thank you. There's no bylaws, there is old business. Schedule J, ideas from mayor and council.
I think we got up to number 10 last time, safety program.
Oh, okay. Interesting. So what did you do last time? What you were just discussing the merits of each thing or motion, like what? Sorry, I wasn't here, so I don't.
There's no notes attached.
No, it was the pleading of the cases.
Okay, well, I'll plead the case for the safety program. I think I kind of pled it on Tuesday. I did reach out to an auditor and I've got a cost and he's actually got availability to come in January. If we were looking to do that, I think it'll just give us a landscape plan to do so many things and put structure in place, which I think will make everybody's lives easier.
Please forward me this information.
Yep.
So that was the motion we made, staff the other day to.
And Harinder had asked me to do it about a week ago, so you guys just motioned what Harinder already told me to do. Is there any other discussion on the safety program? Do I need to do anything?
No, because
Okay.
they'll come with the quote and make that decision.
Okay, museum,
I guess the only thing we haven't agreed that that's going to be in one of our, this is strategic priorities, right? So are we
This-
moving forward with this safety program without having any meaningful discussion on it?
well,
Are we having a problem? You know, why are we all of a sudden focusing on a safety program? I mean,
without sounding like a smartass,
sorry?
it's our responsibility to meet the regulations in the province of British Columbia of the Workers' Compensation Act and the Occupational Health and Safety Regulations.
So we failed to do that?
We're not doing it. I do not think we are meeting all of them, no.
Just for clarification for council, there was a motion at the Tuesday meeting that we were to bring back prices for council. Once we bring back the cost, then that would be where
Yeah.
council has a discussion whether to
Got it.
include it in the budget or not.
Okay, so number 11 was museum. Landscaping, land bridge. IT equipment, hire a person to split time between museum and info center. Well, the back part of it's already been done. The landscaping, the bridge and the IT equipment was all part of what the select committee was putting forward. And that's just to move the museum forward. Harinder also, we could use COVID money for that. So that was one of the things that the ladies were going to recommend, was that they will apply for some of that COVID funding.
Ladies, as in the museum
This,
community.
well, the select committee that gave the proposition to go to a commission. Right. Under the old school, present a report on the real condition.
I think it's time that we do that. It's been hanging over our head for a long time.
We have that report already.
We have the report, we have multiple reports. I think the recommendation there is that we, either our financial person or whoever it is best to deal with that, pulls those together and brings back a plan.
The use, how much is being used, how much is
Yeah.
being used.
What I think we need a motion to do, correct?
I think that was
I don't recall that one. I can go back and have a look.
Well, I think we had said we wanted to know the usage of the facilities. Yeah, I'm pretty sure we made a motion. Yeah, if you can check that with the usage of the facilities.
I believe there are reports from the past that document that as well. There's probably historical reports on that. We have many reports. What we need is they need to pull somebody else to put them in front of them and come up with a report. based on that.
And I would say the data would have to be prior COVID, because our buildings are hardly being used at all because of COVID.
Well, we will have facilities inspection reports done. I have them.
No, not an inspection report, the actual usage,
Usage.
because as Councillor Downey has said in the past, that, underutilized buildings that maybe we can focus our attention on something else rather than a building that's really not being utilized, right? So if we have the numbers, or it was either Councillor Downey or Councillor Cole, maybe even Councillor Cole.
my conversation with Harinder when I asked about something to do with the old school is if we're at a point where it's not going to be torn down and it's not going to be rebuilt and we're going to use it for the next little while here, holding the building empty for the Christmas craft fair and the odd first aid course, is that the best use of it? Or is there an organization within this town that maybe would take over 2 of those classrooms and rent it out and have some people in the building and have the building being used instead of whatever capacity it's being used at? And when Harinder and I spoke about it, that was, what capacity is it being used at? And I think that goes back to what we previously said, is what is it being used? We have one tenant in there who's using 35% of the building 100% of the time. Well, what happens with the other 65%? And is there an opportunity where that group might consider moving another part of their thing into there? Or is there another group in town that might, what are those possibilities? And what would be the cost of the upkeep versus the revenue and that idea of just having that building being used? Well, because we're heating it, we're insuring it, we're doing the necessary repairs, so maybe it should have more life in it. That was my conversation about it as well.
Yeah, I
Councillor
totally agree.
Cole?
Yeah, maybe it's a sort of request for proposal, something along those lines, but I do want to, we asked the question to the public, they said tear it down and repurpose it, so. Do we follow that, or?
Yeah, you can get any answer you want if you don't ask the question properly. And that question wasn't asked very well. And so I don't put much weight in the answer that we got because there was nothing attached to that question that put any value in that property. And the bottom line is our community is under huge financial attack right now. Fish farms are being attacked, our forestry industry is being attacked. Our ability to pay going forward is going to be limited in over the next maybe 10 or 15 or 20 years. So what we need to do, I believe, is look at our resources and say, how can we when we still have a little money, how can we pull it together, hunker down and make our way into, over the next 20 years? That building is going to cost a whole lot less, in my view, to repurpose than it is to destroy and try and find the money to build another one. Because another one's going to be like 5 million. So, yeah. It's really not a.
Yeah.
To me, so when that question was asked, it was so poorly asked that you couldn't really rely on the result.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't make economic sense. So, and the other problem, the other thing we talked about that isn't on here that should be, is we talked about somebody brought a proposal forward that we should subscribe to some education program that would, or participation program that would teach us how to source locally. That was just a few months ago I saw it. Why do we need to pay to have someone who shows us how to do that?
Oh, you're talking about the,
Yeah.
yeah.
When the reality is, we've got the resources right here in this community to take care of that building. All we gotta do is make it into small enough bites that it doesn't have to go to decent bid, and we can take care of it. And I just feel like we need to get that usage report. And I know darn well we're gonna be surprised by how many people in this community benefit from that whole school right now.
Yeah, it's great to call that about, we're under attack, yes. Is it the only way we're gonna go down and have less revenues if houses are empty and taxes aren't being paid? That's highly unlikely. In this real estate, there's could be zero jobs, like that, be horrible, families, bloggers, but are we really under attack?
Financially, yeah, we are.
Yeah, we
Yeah, we are.
We are.
If the industry goes down,
Yep, we are.
Big time.
in what way though? 'Cause we're
Think about
relying
how
on-
Goose Mill just shut down. They're under attack.
How many years has it been since Gold River had a flicker of life in it? Look at Port
I don't think
Alice.
it's not a major mill like that, like if we go.
Think
we
about the
knock it
strike,
off.
we had, how many months was that without, during the strike?
7 months.
And talking to businesses and, it was
I understand the
dying.
people are, no doubt, everyone does, but the taxes got paid.
Because they got back to work afterwards and deferred the taxes.
I think we are under attack, financial attack.
We are.
And it could be unprecedented. And the other thing is we're under attack by our federal government because they've borrowed such a huge amount of money for this COVID thing, that in the next 10 years, you might not see these federal government grants that we've been swallowing.
Yeah.
They're gonna be gone. They're gonna pay this debt back somehow.
Yeah.
So we're under attack, believe me.
That's yeah.
May I just make a,
Sure. One sec,
No, go
Karen.
ahead. Let-
Okay, go ahead, Harinder. Go ahead, Harinder.
Councillor Barron, the last budget meeting that we had, one comment that came from Councillor Mitchell was that, look, we have so many reports. We don't want more reports. We want us to take action. Otherwise, the reports become stale based. When I met with yourself, Councillor Barron, Councillor Downey, and Councillor Mitchell, what was just said, one of the things that came consistently is how do we best utilize the assets that are available to us, taking into account our current needs, our future staffing needs that are coming in. From that exercise, we identify A, assets that we have, and B, identify opportunities for consolidation. And I'm not sure if I'm distracting you. I believe I'm not qualified, not that you asked me, I believe I'm not qualified. And I believe in our town office, we don't have one body that's qualified to give us that assessment that we should rely upon. I quoted Councillor Mitchell when he said he doesn't want any more reports. However, I would like to make the council aware that as we speak, there is a grant available where a third-party company which does nothing but facilities assessment or needs assessment can come in and help us with our needs. Help us identify your need analysis in the gap and express it, that which at that time the council can decide what do we do. Do we impact it? Do we develop it? What do we do? I would like to ask the opportunity today or the next time if the council could support having that one study completed. I know Council Mitchell for proposing this, but I feel this is a very important report. The benefit of that report, Council Mitchell and the council would be, it is not going to tell us what the costs are. It is going to interview us all, and I do an estate analysis of facility analysis needs. I believe that the grant that I'm referring to covers us for about, I don't know, 50% or 75% of the cost. Not sure what the protocols of this meeting are or how to ask for that permission, but I just wanted to leave this thought in front of the council. It's an asset that is sitting, that is being underutilized by the municipality. We need to utilize or to do something about those underutilized assets.
Thank you for your comments. Mayor Wickstrom?
I have to go, so I'm just going to, because for some reason my comments weren't added that I sent later, I'm just going to very quickly say, everybody knows how I feel about the pole in the council chambers, and I know how everybody else feels. Generator for the seniors home, I think, is a great idea. It could come from our COVID funds. A small pump track for the little ones at Robinson Park. I'm in alignment with Councillor Cole. That's why I wrote that down. I think it's a low-hanging fruit that would be great for us to do. And actually, the new equipment and better rocks at the park, just generally upgrading some of our parks, I think would be a great low-hanging, not very expensive fruit that we'd be able to give to the community with families. And I apologize, but I have to go catch a ferry.
Well, while you're walking out, for the small pump track, and I think the new equipment at the parks, very high level conversations with our engineering contractors. They do have a community payback fund that they have internally, and in speaking with them, they would be interested in a project like that where they could donate, in-kind engineering services to, design a pump track or do like a planning layout for a park or something like that. So something to keep in mind when we're looking at these items of the budget is that Macahome may be able to provide some community support.
It's fantastic. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Apologies.
Thanks. So then the long-term plan, number 13. When I spoke with Harinder, I just think we need long-term plans kind of for everything. I think, again, it's what you're saying, Councillor Downey, we have all these reports. Well, somebody needs to take those reports and say, in the next 5 years, these sorts of things have to be done in the next 10 years. And I think you could mix your capital assets in with that as well, and just actually have a plan. So we know, like, we've got $300,000 sitting in sidewalks. Where are the next ones? What's going on? Like, or, does Julian feel like he has that planned out? I don't know, right? But if Julian says Haddington Hill, is a fugitive water issue, and that sidewalk's horrible, that road's horrible, but it's on a bank and those trees are all dying and we keep butchering them. And, if that's actually on the radar because we have a report that says there's risk there that needs to be mitigated, and we don't have that on our radar that needs to be done in the next few years, like that's what I would really like to see, is taking these reports and the 2 bits of the operational on the ground of actually putting us together. And it goes into the fire department as well with like the truck situation and the SCBAs and everything. It's just a capital assets overall. What is the plan?
If I may comment on that. Julian, last meeting, was frequent to report back, this was in the plan and this is what we're doing. So, and I know as far as sidewalks, he does have a schematic and a plan for different areas around. He is thinking forward, we don't have the information. I think really what we're talking about is, you know, almost that master plan. It's like, okay, in these years, but where do we get that information from? Short of, you know, a conversation once a year at budget time where we talk about it, and then it's buried in documents, right? So I think that's what we're talking about, is we are attaching dollars to projects, and what's inside, you know, Pete's mind or Laura's mind or Julian's mind is actually in print and easily referenced. So we can have a sense to know what's coming down the pipe.
And some input, frankly, too.
Well, yeah, that's true.
Jud's done a great job picking where the sidewalks are going, but maybe fills out.
The fire department third-party review, I know that was, Harinder has spoke about that, was actually having a third party come in and say, this is where we're at, this is where your gaps are, that sort of analysis idea. And I know he spoke with Dean, and it sounded like possibly even fire chief from Port Hardy could come down and do that kind of on a tete-a-tete, as opposed to hiring an actual consultant. Come in. The safety audit, I think, is basically the same sort of idea as the safety program. The marina, the fishing float and the kayak float. I'm assuming, Ryan, you're kind of the spearheader on that one, but you know, I thought something was very interesting with that last meeting with Kevin when he was saying how you have to allow for access. And then Derek wanted to start cutting it off, selling it. And Kevin right away said, well, why don't you develop them? And I thought that to me makes more sense. You know, like why isn't maybe the one by the apartments done up a little bit so that it is pleasing, or even the one down by Martin's, and you could pack a kayak down there and throw it in, or paddleboard. That seems to be the big deal, right? Is paddleboards. So maybe.
Sorry, I'm missing something. What are you talking about?
You know how we have those accesses on Beach Drive?
Yep.
Yeah, what Kevin said, why don't you start to kind of develop them a little bit, make them into a little bit of a park, or like level out at, my vision was level out at the bottom, and, you know, maybe have the ability to pull a kayak up, and maybe there's a bench there, or I don't know, right? Like somebody creative would get in there, but that ties back to the pump track, and then to me that goes back to the parks, and you know, we had that group that was very adamant, and then things kind of fizzled because the grant application didn't go through. But I think there's some real people there that could be harnessed, get that park committee up and going this year, and actually come up with a plan and say, yeah, you know what, Robinson Park, all that stuff is really old and it's time to replace it, and we're recommending that you put a pump track in there, or this stuff back here gets ditched, and it,
Dog parks.
you know, and actually as that committee, because then you're getting the feedback from the public as opposed to staff saying, well, we drove by 16 times and there was only 5 kids there, you know, like some of these things I think fit back into that long-term planning, but we have the ability to get that committee up and going and give them a direction. Because I know that's one of the hardest parts being on the harbor committee, is we never seem to have direction.
I think that it confuses the issue. A beach where you can land a kayak is a moving target, right? There's 17 feet between high and low tide. And so it's great at high tide, you can get down there and boom, the beach is right there. At low tide, you got to pack the thing out across the mud and rocks to get to the water. So there's nothing wrong with that, right? That's one option for kayaking, not a very practical option for a lot of people. A kayak float, on the other hand, is always at water level. It's always easy access, it's safe, and it's something that maybe we can look at getting an operator that's gonna have something going on, a concession of some type in the marina. They're gonna rent kayaks, or they're gonna provide tours, or whatever they're gonna do.
That's what's just happened in Port Alice, right?
Yeah.
Port Alice just had a young couple's moved in there, and they're gonna operate a kayak thing. And but I guess it goes back to that higher level is what I was meaning. Sorry, Councillor Downey.
See, I don't think it's either or. I think it's and. We have those spaces along Beach Drive, and I actually asked the question of Kevin. I said, could we be using those? Right now, they're filled with brush and the access is minimal, but even for somebody wanting to park a vehicle and go walk along the beach and into Hoy Bay, you know, you're parking at the end of Beach Drive, and that blocks access there too. So why don't we brush those out and clean them up? And, you know, we
We
brought
pass to the saltwater.
significant chunks of land. Yeah, just giving people access.
I think that's great. But I think there's two completely different issues.
Yeah,
And
I agree.
fishing float, again, yeah, you can go to Clacchiwi and fish off the beach, but most people can't do that. Especially when they have little kids, right? So having a fishing float where you can, mom can take the kids down, or dad can take the kids down, have a bench to sit on, the kids fish off a safe dock that nobody's ever gonna tie a boat to. Those kind of things. I think those are things we can provide that provide a real use for everybody in the community to benefit from our waterfront, just like access to the beach.
100%. Compensation and medical benefits for council, I think we've done that one to death now. No increase in taxes. I think, again, that's probably, we're okay, not discussing that any further. Do we need to hire a project manager / coordinator in the Public Works Department?
I think that's probably a broader discussion.
I think it's
Around
yeah,
personnel.
exactly. I think it fits into an HR look at a bunch of things. Anybody have anything more on the ones that Gabby had already commented on?
I agree.
I'll speak to the poll and without knowing what we're doing with our facilities, no,
Yeah.
I didn't spend money on that. And I do think we need to consider a national assessment. Ranger said, and Kevin Brooks said that as well. There's a lot involved. It's not just
Yeah.
looking up how much use, you know, they do energy audits. Condition of the building, so it's kind of a missing
Piece of the puzzle.
piece. We've got assessments on the physical buildings. So that work's done. When they were doing the assessment, they've got that work, which is great. Pretty hard to, sure nice to make a decision on that in school in our turn.
Like, it's the only building we own that has proper wheelchair access.
Yeah.
Just so you
There's
know.
something to be said for
There's not much
that,
said for that.
right?
Yeah.
So that's a plus. The other thing I saw here was generators for the seniors facility. First of all, we should be going to BC Hydro and asking for some help, because it's their fault that we need generators, because they put us on a real
Yeah.
low level of service, and they're going to keep us there until some industry moves up or demands more power. In the meantime, they're going to ship this power to the States. And so I think they should be paying for these generators. Secondly, the seniors that Port Neal Housing Society or Fallon Housing Society has money. They're not broke. They got a couple $100 grand sitting in the bank. So if the housing society feels they need generators for the seniors, at what level do they need? They need to be able to run full power for 3 days in case of a power outage, or they just need to keep lights on?
I was accosted in IGA, and it was, there's uppy beds and there's CPAPs.
Yep.
Never mind a senior who is privileged enough to have family who's just made them a month's worth of meals that are sitting in their freezer. So, you know, the idea was, you guys got that COVID money, wouldn't this be a perfect fit? But maybe there's a partnership that could be, I mean, I'd much rather spend our COVID money on something like that than some sort of a report or something. You know,
Sure.
It's just an idea. I mean, I think that was the
And
whole.
I know that in order to do that, it's not going to be inexpensive.
Mhm.
It's not just, you know, cost us $70,000 to put a generator in one building, the fire hall.
Yeah.
One building.
Yeah.
One panel. Now we're talking about 12 panels. Right? We're talking about a lot more complex situation. So it's not just going to be dropping a generator in. So I think we need to try and figure out what is it we really want to do here. We're going to have to put
I
in.
struggle with, like, there's no generator here, there's no generator. We have a proper warning station at the school. And it was kind of like the Legion, like, if we put all this money, who's maintaining those generators? Like, if it's for the public good, Public Works is maintaining, no, it's always going to be right with that. 5 years from now, let's check the oil and our
You gotta figure out how many kilowatts and what's it gonna cost to do it. And I thought we weren't allowed to use COVID funds for capital expense.
I thought he actually talked to our officer and the officer said that the generator for the Legion or something we
The
own,
generators would fall into.
it would fall into it. Yeah, we did get an email on that, so.
There you go.
Yeah, and just to your comment, to my mind, we keep wanting to talk about inclusivity. And there are people who are seniors who may leave their house to go to the Legion because they're comfortable there, same as there are seniors who would be comfortable to go to the fire hall, or there would be seniors or people with kids would maybe not be comfortable to go to the Legion unless your kids grew up there like mine did, but they would be comfortable maybe to go to the fire hall. So I think we have to look at it from that perspective too. If 3-day power outages is going to be our way of life, then less is not necessarily more.
It's something to consider.
Yeah. No new business, no meeting items for in camera, no in camera. Question? Yeah, sorry.
Apologies, there's a report coming up at the next council meeting, but as we're talking budget, might be good for council to have just maybe a heads up today that it's coming up on Tuesday, is we've had several complaints recently about lack of washrooms in the downtown core. Obviously from 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, during the off season, it's open for public washrooms, but about 5 o'clock, those get closed down, and weekends during the off season, they're not open. So there is a report coming forward, bringing this the issue forward to council, with a few options. So, with the existing washrooms, do we leave a door unlocked and chance the vandalism? But, at least there's a washroom there. Do we get a year-round porta potty? So in terms of budget discussion, I think this is something to add to.
Okay, so does your report include that this, whatever we're doing over at the harbor? Because I'm still not entirely sure
I don't see
Where-
that on this budget list.
where that
actually.
all fell out into. Is that included in the report, or is that going to be a question that we're going to have for you?
I think that'll be a question that you'll have for us. I know that Rebecca's still working with small craft harbors, trying to get everything in tandem. The asbestos review, and as well as everything that comes last. Yeah, federal government works at 18 slower than us.
Okay.
She's still working to get all of that information. Yeah, there are other options, frankly. We let small craft harbors keep their building, they can tear it down, and we move our options to someplace what we need.
Yeah, which if we go back to the parking lot B, I think there might have been an issue about sewer running uphill, but there was an opportunity we felt within that area where the garbage and the recycling, there was room to put one of those all-in-ones like, what's his name had shown us from the arena. There was space to put one of those there. So there was just a couple little boy things had to be worked out. But did we have any public on the meeting?
No.
So no questions from the public or the media. So motion to adjourn. Seconded, moved, all in favor? Opposed, carried, done.
For this one.
Goodbye, Harinder.